All right, folks, it's 6 o'clock. We're going to get started tonight. Thank you for coming, for attending our capital improvement project community meeting. Today's December, today's not the
16th.
12th. I should have changed that, right?
Mhm.
What is it, the 16th?
16th.
16th, 2024. I'm Jeff Sortisio. I'm your school superintendent. To my right and your left is Frankie May. She is our assistant superintendent for finance and operations. With us in the back of the room are our partners from Campus Construction Management and Young and Wright. They've been integral in the development of this capital improvement project plan and have helped us with our previous project as well.
So we do the arrows.
All right, capital improvement project 2024. We have dubbed this a maintenance and modernization project, and we will explain why as we get a little bit deeper into the presentation. As of right now, that's just a general schedule for you. If you were wondering about when this project came about, officially it was adopted by the board in October 16th. But the background and the development of the project really goes back about 10 years ago. When our partners at Young and Wright did a building condition survey, which is a requirement to be done every 5 years, and identified a number of things that were ending useful life and would be out of warranty, and some of those items didn't end up on this project. So again, about a decade ago, the board and my predecessor worked with the community and the in-school community and the general community to identify some district needs and develop long-term plans to maintain our district and make some improvements as well. Now, tomorrow is the vote. If we have a positive vote, then the design process follows that, followed by SED submission, which could take anywhere from 8 to 9 months, perhaps even longer. Once we get approval from SED, and SED means the State Education Department, then we would go out to bid. That means we seek contractors who are willing to do the work. They provide us what they think is a fair price. If it meets what our budget is, then we have a good match. Construction on this project would not begin until the summer of 2027, and it would close out in December of 2028. So that sounds like a long time away, and it is. But this is the way schools function in order to do large projects and to make sure that we are doing what we can to be as fiscally sound as possible. Before I go on, this is absolutely welcome to be an interactive meeting. This is not like a Board of Education meeting where we're not really able to answer questions. If you have questions throughout this presentation, I will do my best, or Frankie will do her best to answer them. Okay. All right. So this project right now is broken down into 2 propositions. Proposition number 1 is a total of $19.3 million. This is the maintenance half of the project. You'll see the Eden Elementary roof replacement, GLP parking lot replacement, GLP door replacement and ventilation updates, renovation of a couple of pre-K classrooms, the middle high school roof replacement, and the middle and high school parking lot and sidewalk replacements. And there's a couple of photos there of a roof and some parking lots as well. When it comes to the roofs, both Eden Elementary and the middle high school roofs are nearly out of warranty. Roofs have a 30-year warranty. School districts are not, well, let me explain this a little bit better. By the time this project, if approved, the construction on this project would be at the time the roofs are no longer under warranty. That's important because schools only get aid on roof replacements when that warranty is over. So if we did it 5 years early, we would be doing it at 100% of the cost. If we do it when it's out of warranty, then we're doing it at 78% aid, meaning we pay 22% of that cost as a district. Both roofs are failing. We've had multiple leaks in this building. We've had multiple leaks in the elementary building, the last of which caused us to have to close that auditorium down for a long period of time. Okay. Yes.
So is this just the flat part at the back of the elementary? elementary?
It is not the slate roof.
The slate, because that had just been replaced in 2 projects.
Correct. Correct. It's just a flat roof. Good question. Thank you. Like roofs, parking lots also have a shelf life. And if you pay attention as you drive through our lots, and that's a picture of the GLP lot there, it is time to replace those lots. So good news and bad news when it comes to lots is you don't really know exactly what you can do until you start doing some testing and some boron analysis. The hope always is that we can just do a mill and replace, which means you take off that top layer and you replace it with new asphalt because you have a good solid sub base. If we have to do more than that, that means the sub base needs to be replaced. That gets a little bit more complicated and obviously a little bit more expensive. But all of that is included in proposition number 1. The door replacement and ventilation updates at GLP. You'll notice there's an asterisk next to those 2 items. Those are items that are left over from actually 2 projects ago that we were not able to complete because financially they didn't fit. But they are items that need to be included as we move forward. There's 2 pre-K classrooms at GLP that have not been touched really since that building was repurposed as a school. They need significant updates in terms of storage and electric and whatnot to make those good spaces for our youngest learners. We talked about the roof at the middle high school. The parking lot is similar to GLP, and we have a number of sidewalks that are beginning to fail as well. That's proposition number 1, $19.3 million, the maintenance component of the project. Proposition number 2, $10.7 million. This is more the modernization side of the project. Eden Elementary classroom renovations. There's an asterisk there because the project we just finished renovated 8 classrooms in that building. Now that building has not been touched since it was built, essentially. So those classrooms really are due a renovation or a refresh. We were lucky enough to replace a number of sidewalks at Eden Elementary, and it's time to finish that work as well. The middle school odd foyer, you all walked through that space. It's a very large open space. It's used for a lot of different events, both school related and community related. And if you take a look at the ceiling and you take a look at the walls, we absolutely have an opportunity to make that a better space, not only for the community, but also a space that our students can be proud of. And I share that in this library that was part of our last project and that adjacent hallway. And a lot of those decisions were made because today's students aren't the same as the students that were coming here when the buildings were built. And students, deserve a space that's newer, fresher, cleaner, and meets their more modern learning needs. And including the foyer is upgrades to the odd stage and the finishes on the sidewalls, particularly some work in our main office and guidance suites that have been untouched again since the inception of this building. Some additional sidewalks, replace the scoreboard to mirror the softball scoreboard that was part of the last project. And then that last item you'll see, and this is an interesting one. Across the district, select AC upgrades. AC means air conditioning. When we included this in the project, the thought and the plan was there might be a possibility of legislation in our state in order to address heat mitigation in schools. Schools get hot, just like any other space. Friday, our governor signed into law a requirement that schools have a plan in place to mitigate spaces, not just classrooms, but all spaces based on the heat in those areas. Now we know we had an inkling that this was coming. There's some discussion about it. We weren't sure if she was going to sign it or not. And Mr. Sitzman, who's in the back of the room as well, is our director of facilities, and he did a pretty good job of doing some data collection in some of those hot weeks we had in the spring. So we know where our hottest classrooms are. And so when it says select AC upgrades, we do have to do some work in those areas to make sure that we can maintain them as learning environments. The other option would be once a classroom gets to a certain threshold, we would have to move that class to a different space. Any questions about proposition 1 or 2 at this point? Yes.
The EE renovations, the classrooms, is that gonna be expanding some of them like you did with the first time around?
I don't know that yet. You know, I think obviously it depends if Proposition 1 and 2 pass. I know that early on, we identified some rooms that we could expand. It would depend on what rooms are selected. I know we have the list of rooms, to be honest with you, listen, I haven't looked to see if there's adjacent space to make them larger or not. But I can tell you that even the new flooring and the new cabinetry and the storage, and you're gonna see some photos in a second, has changed the educational model in those spaces. Okay, and
Does that
it's,
include furniture then?
oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
That'll help.
Any other questions? Yes,
On the foyer update, what use will the update?
I'm sorry, I don't hear
So-
well,
so
I'm
the,
sorry.
the foyer update, so what will people be able to use it now that they can't use?
So when you see the photos of it, it'll be easier for me to explain it. So I'll give you a little snapshot now, is that it's really underutilized space during the school day. So we're looking at, modernizing the finishes in the walls, but including furniture in there so students could use it as more of a student lounge type area, or, that type of space.
Same issue with the heat?
Same issue with the heat.
Like, would you have to, for if it was heat mitigation?
No, and that is not an area that gets real hot in the building. The auditorium itself is already air conditioned. So that really wouldn't be part of that component of the project. All right, now in terms of the finances, again, proposition number 1 is $19.3 million. I'm going to turn this over to Frankie to discuss that a little bit further.
Okay, so we're going to compare and contrast a little bit Proposition 1 versus Proposition 2, since they're two separate items on the ballot. So when we look at Proposition 1, it is 19.3 million, which is a 0% local taxpayer impact, which causes a no incremental tax increase to the taxpayers. Proposition 1 can pass on its own, which you're going to see when we go to Proposition 2 is different from Proposition 2. If we look at the top graph on the screen, you'll notice that this is when we're looking at our debt service levels, it's super important. Like Mr. Sortisio said, we were planning for projects up to 10 years ahead of time. That's important for financial stability and long-term financial planning. So you want to try and keep your debt service levels at a consistent level. That prevents from district budgets, current year budget, to swing high and low. So you want to keep it consistent. So if we look at the first dot on that graph is the current year budget of 2025. We knew years ago that we were going to have debt falling off in 2027. So it's important that Proposition 1 brings on new debt and it would keep that debt service level consistent. So you see 2027 for the next 7 years until 2033, it is a consistent level of debt service payments. You can see in 2034, we're already having another debt drop off. So you would expect that the district would start planning. We are already starting to plan for that project that would come on a few years before then. So when we look at a capital project, Proposition 1, we do receive building aid at a ratio of 78.2%. So building aid is essentially state funding that is earmarked for school districts directly for capital projects. And it can only be touched if a district does a capital project. We do receive 78.2% back. So what that means is for every dollar that we invest in a capital project, the district receives 78% back. The remaining 21.8% is local share, which means that your taxpayers have to pick up the cost of that. The district does have 3.56 million, which is that 21% or 22%, to offset that capital project. It is your district capital reserves can only be used for capital projects. So it's savings account that is set aside directly for capital projects. So essentially that between the building aid and the capital reserve, there is a no increase to the local taxpayers for Proposition 1. Like Mr. Sortisio mentioned, Proposition 1 focuses on infrastructure and maintenance items and replaces items that are going out of warranty.
Hold on a second.
Yep.
Questions about that?
Is that percentage right? Is that 3,500,000? That's everything that's left in the 2 capital reserves, right?
Yes. Yep.
So 19.3 million times 21.8. Is that 3,560,539?
He's asking if that
Yeah.
3.5 is the full 21.8%.
It should be right around there, yeah.
So what
But isn't some of our debt service covering that too? Our
Mm.
current debt service?
So 21 times the 19.3. What's that?
See what the actual one was. Yeah, it's 4.2.
So it's not the same. So what's the difference?
So you see where it says $600,000 on the chart on the top right? That's our
in
current
addition
debt
to-
service.
That's in addition to what's in the reserves that we would already need. in Proposition one.
This is, so think about a budget this way. And in this case, each year, say, correct me if I'm wrong, okay? You're the one that knows this
Yep.
better than me. Each year, the district has debt service that we owe on projects in the amount of $600,000. Okay? In order to do proposition number one, at no additional tax impact, the board directed me and thus Mrs. May here to set aside as much money as we could to offset the future cost of the project. If we didn't set aside that $3.56 million in order to do proposition number one, you wouldn't see a flat line going out into the future on our debt service. That would go up. The equivalent of that 3.5. So the difference between the percent, the 21.8% and that 3.5 is what we're already budgeting for in terms of debt service. So when we talk about debt service being flat, we could drop it down. We could drop it down to zero. $600,000 reduction in our budget for the individual taxpayers, you're not going to feel that in a positive way. But I still have to replace roofs. And at some point, your taxes are then going to go up significantly because that $600,000 is no longer there. So when we say no tax impact, it's really no additional tax impact.
Because the 600,000 that you're short, you're planning on, that's going to be part of the school taxes for the next year.
I wouldn't call it short. It's what we're already planning for. We're projecting forward. Okay, where we're short in that 21.8% is 3.56 million, which we saved.
Yeah,
So-
that's the balance of the two reserve funds.
That's the balance of the reserve, yes, of the capital reserve.
So you're basically saying the 3.5 plus the 600,000 is.
The 21.8.
Takes care of the local share. So no additional tax impact. So it's not entirely correct to say there's no tax impact. There's always a tax impact. And some folks like to say, well, that money you're getting from the state, that's our taxes too. Yes, it is. And either we use it or somebody else uses it.
Yeah, I should just be clear that's all. Because the numbers, you say, people when they look at zero local tax impact, you have the money in savings as the reserve fund. Taxes that you have obligated, yeah, I'm gonna use the 600.
Right.
for
Yeah.
that project.
Yeah,
So
it's
you
not,
have
there's not a
savings.
magic tree in the back of the campus where we can pluck money off. It's all tax money.
Savings that are in the reserve funds, or it's gonna be, it's part of my tax rate going ahead. There's no, other than the reserves, the building funds, any additional amount will have to come out of taxes.
Correct.
Mhm.
Correct. Okay. Anything else?
And then Jeff, would you be starting to rebuild that reserve back up moving forward?
Yeah, so one of the things the board approved is, so when we talk about reserves, a capital reserve has a window in which you can fund it. You can fund it for up to 10 years, and then you can use it until it's gone, right? So our last capital reserve was at the end of that window. So at my recommendation, the board created a new capital reserve with a much bigger number of $15 million. But that started this year, and we can fill that across the next 10 years. That doesn't mean it'll ever get to 15, but it could. And if you think about the way construction costs have skyrocketed, and knowing the long-term needs of our district, the infrastructure for our need, if we have an opportunity to save now to offset those costs later, it's just a good long-term plan.
The only other thing was the local share of 21.8. So is that consistent for proposal Proposition 1 and Proposition 2?
That's a great segue to our next slide.
So Proposition 2, similarly to Proposition 1, does have that 78.2% state building aid. You can look up the graph on the left. So this is the debt service levels. So you can see in 2025 and the next in 2026, it is a consistent level. At 2027, it does jump up, adding on Proposition 2 for the next 7 years before it drops off again in 2034, which is Proposition 2 is 10.7 million. It does have a 1.96 incremental tax increase for our local taxpayers, which is about $56 per $100,000 of assessed value. Unlike Proposition 1, Proposition 2 cannot pass without Proposition 1 passing. So we need to have a yes vote on Proposition 1 in order for Proposition 2 to pass, with hopefully a yes vote as well. And then again, the 78.2% state building aid ratio and the 21.8% local share.
Does that make sense? The Proposition 1 can stand alone, Proposition 2 can't pass without Proposition 1. Does that make sense to you? Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so, and I agree with this, but why is it over 7 years? It seems like the building inspections every 5 years. When you said construction, will be done by in 4 years.
2028.
So what you're saying is we're gonna build in 4 years, but we're gonna pay over 7. So you used arbitrarily 7 years as opposed to 4 or 5 length of the project, or?
Just the way our debt is actually scheduled out. So the state actually, when we submit our final cost report, is when the aid starts flowing. So when we submit it in 2028, that's why it's super important that we submit that final cost report so that we can start generating aid. The state does not give aid in one lump sum. They segregate it out over the 15 years. So we wouldn't receive that aid right away. It's kind of segregated out, if that makes sense.
So why are you choosing, so 7 years is not arbitrary?
No, it's just the way our debt service schedule is.
Well, think about our past slide. There likely is, and I don't have a pointer on here, there likely is some debt falling off at some point here from a previous project. Okay. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, so Proposition 1, again, the maintenance component of the project. Here's 2 beautiful pictures of roofs. They are what they are. You'll see a lot of lines there, and they need to be replaced. There's no getting around it. We have leaks in both buildings. At least Eden Elementary has a fix, a temporary fix at the moment. As I said earlier, when a roof is out of warranty, that's the time to replace it, because you get your full amount of aid. Yep.
I already asked about the elementary building, but wasn't there 2 projects ago when we did the football field, some of the roof done here at the high school? Is this gonna be completely doing it over, or is that there a part that is already okay?
You recall that, Mike?
I don't think we did any of the roof. We did a lot of masonry up there, the outside of the weight room that you might be thinking of. So they were up there a ton, and there was kind of blanket it off. I think that's what you're probably. Yeah, I don't think any of the, maybe some minor repairs.
Yeah. So it'll be the whole roof here.
Yes. Again, parking lots, the parking lot on the left is the entrance to GLP. The roadway on the right is that access road to the back of the campus in the middle of high school. And you can see the potholes and the cracks and whatnot. Okay, so these are the two pre-K classrooms that are slated for renovation. You can see that, there's not much in the way of storage. They're outdated. The flooring is outdated. The lighting, no, that lighting is new. That would be maintained on the picture on the right. The picture on the left, you can see that that's very different lighting. That would be changed out and modernize those rooms to be similar to the other classrooms in that building, with technology, again, with storage and finishes. And this is what it could look like. This is a rendering. This is a perhaps, where you've got cubbies for the students can store their things. There's storage all along that back wall. There'll be technology in the room as well. You can see in the picture on the right, if I move me out of the way, if I can do that, sink area and cupboards, whatnot. This is a bathroom. Our pre-K classrooms have bathrooms. I think all of our classrooms at GLP have bathrooms as well. Just a much brighter, better space for our youngest learners. Proposition number 2, the smaller picture is a current classroom with the old parquet floor. Really lacks storage, really lacks a good flow to the classroom. The larger picture it's not a potential classroom idea. This is actually one of our classrooms that was remodeled in our last project. Probably a 5th grade classroom, and I say that based on the seating arrangement. You've got round tables, more space, better lighting with the new windows. Across the back of the room over here is storage cabinets with I want to say markable walls on them. You've got a big whiteboard over here. Again, lighting and ceiling in here, just much better space. This is the odd foyer we talked about. Take a look at the ceiling. It's some sort of coffered something or other with some lights that were probably original to the building. This wood paneling would be changed out. Probably not a real expensive change in this area. You're looking at ceilings, lights, and new wall decor, for lack of a better term, and what it could look like. So this goes back to the question that was answered or asked earlier. What would you do with that space? This would be a great flexible space for students for either on their own and at study hall time, or a different space for a teacher that wanted to use a more non-traditional classroom. And again, this is just a rendering. This is just what it could look like before we get to what it will look like if we have a positive budget vote. We have user group meetings, so the people who are going to use that space most, whether it's the folks from the musical or the music department or the art department, and we get together and say, what do you want to see? What could that look like? How could we work together on this? The one criteria for this entire space that we did agree on is all of the furniture you see there, with the exception of the built-in stadium seating, is movable. So in those events where we have a lot of people in the foyer, that furniture could be moved elsewhere and create the most space possible. But it also creates a nice sitting area, a very welcoming atmosphere in our building. Okay. Now, and so don't get too hung up on the graphics on the wall. We've already made the decision. There won't be any more corn. You're welcome, Mrs. Della Penta. We've got enough corn showing around here, and the kids don't need to see any more of it. But you'll notice the tile on this wall here is the same as the tile in the hallway outside the library. We did a lot of great things in the last project. I can't tell you how many people asked if we would tile the rest of the building, because it just changes the atmosphere. It's much brighter. It's a happier place. If you walk in some of the other hallways, it's really dark, and it changes the atmosphere in the school. So if we can do a little by little, then we will. The auditorium itself, we did some pretty significant upgrades to the lighting and sound in the last project. And now it's time to continue in that space that every one of our students will experience at some point, even if it's only for graduation. Okay? I said this when we met with the different faculty groups. I'm not sure who ordered the teal seating or whether it was on consignment or what happened there, but that just doesn't match with our school colors, and seating has changed quite a bit and since those were installed. So again, a possibility of what it could look like. Updated seats, school colors. You'll notice on the side walls, different sound paneling that is more aesthetically pleasing. Different front to the stage. You probably haven't noticed it if you've been in the yard lately. Lucinda, I'm sure you have. There is literally a strip along the bottom of our stage with outlets. And Mr. McDonough, our building principal, says, I think every student in the school could plug their phone in right there. It just makes no sense to have outlets like that. It's just that at the time it was designed, that's what it should look like, but we can do better than that. Yes.
What's wrong with the seats other than the fact that they're teal? Are they worn or are they?
They're getting there. I've had worse seats in districts I've been in, so I'll be very honest with you. They are starting to get worn. There's also new seating is sized differently than when these seats were put in. So full transparency, they're still functional, yes.
But they're headed into breakdown though.
They
you're
are.
also saying.
Yeah, they are.
There are some that are broken and because of the age of them, they can't repair them. So
Well, and it also comes to a point where you don't want to repair them.
well, they are.
So I mean, if you take a look across the back of the auditorium in this rendering as well, it's a much cleaner space. And again, when you're designing spaces for students, you want them to be proud of their school. And you want them to have spaces that, like I said, that they're proud of, that they want to be in. This is a great example. This library is packed all the time now. I mean, this is where the kids want to be. It's a coffee shop feel on purpose. That was what our design team went for. And it's a great space for them to be in. A couple other things in Proposition 2. This is the current conference room. It looks more like an interrogation room in our main office and guidance suite. Again, has not been touched since the building was built. And then some sidewalks that clearly are starting to fail. So baseball scoreboard, is it functional? Yes. Does it match the scoreboard that we just put in? Interestingly, we put in a softball scoreboard because baseball have scoreboard, and there's some rules that girls and boys teams should have some equity in terms of what they have, and we created inequity by putting a great scoreboard in the softball diamond, and it's time to update that as well. And it's not a great expense, but it is something that should come through a project. Comments or questions?
I don't have a question, I just have a comment. I just retired from the education field a year and a half ago. And I graduated from high school in 1976, yes, way long ago. And I was of the educational model where we were little robots. We sat in a terrible desk, in a terrible chair, and we just did, that's what we did. That's how we learned. But things have changed so much, even in the last 5 years before I retired. Learning styles, learning environments, and some people might look at some of this stuff and say, well, we don't need that. We don't need that. Well, we don't need that, but our students and our future students need that. And as Jeff said, it's something we want them to be proud of so that they're motivated to come here. I happen to work with kids who weren't motivated to go to school, so they came to a special school. And just little things we did in our special school to motivate them to come made all the difference in the world. And I'm proud to be part of this board and part of this community. I was not from here originally. I'm an implant. But I just think, I had nieces and nephews that went before these structural things are changing, and they take a look at this because they live locally and they're like, wow, I wish it was like that when we were there. I just think it's a very positive thing, and I hope more people share that. sentiment.
So you talked about seating, and I just found the slide. I forgot that it was in the presentation. And thank you for everything you shared, Cheryl. I really appreciate it. The smaller picture is an existing classroom. The larger, well, they're both existing classrooms. The larger picture is an example of what we were able to do in the last project in Eden Elementary. And what you're seeing is this is all flexible seating. So students can sit in this round chair or on this round ball or down at this low desk or up here or over there and wherever they want, because it helps them focus. And flexible seating is fantastic, as opposed to here's your plastic chair and your desk. Hopefully your legs fit underneath it. And there's not much that a teacher can do to change the space. Where the flexibility that the remodeling and the revamping of these rooms is just been immense.
Students are easily distracted now. There's so many distractions going on in the world and in school. And when you talk about getting storage space for a pre-K room or a kindergarten room, the less that's out distracting a kid, the more focused the student can give to the teacher and stuff. Again, years ago, I never would have bought that. I would have been like, oh, make them sit down and pay attention. But it's not that way anymore. I learned that the last 5 years of my career. It's different. I'm glad that we can offer things to these kids so that they can manage what we expect them to do, and that is get an education.
Just for this, if you go to the time frame, right? So one of the things we've been working on this for, well, obviously for 10 years, but there's a reason why we're going out to bid in 2025-ish and middle of 26. What ends or what starts September of 26? The Bill Stadium is over. It's going to be constructed. So this timing is particular because we're hoping we have a ton of contractors that'll be very hungry because their job's just basically finished up. And they're going to be eager to come work summer of 2027 at Eden and the summer of 28 at Eden. So there's also some specific in regards to the timing of this project and why it's going out, when it's going out right now. So a lot of it's based off of that. Projects that's gone out prior and then are going to be done in 25 and 26, the cost is astronomical. So we're hoping we're going to see some better bids in summer of 26. Construction of 27.
Yeah, very, very real scenario, Don, that the stadium has driven costs through the roof. No pun intended, since we need a couple of roofs. To the point where districts have had to push off very large components of their project because the cost was coming in three times as high as they predicted. So our timing is spot on for the conclusion of that stadium project. Yes.
Ask another schedule question. Are you only working in the summer, or are you working year round?
Depends on the part of the component of the project. So we do work year round, but schools being schools, the bulk of the construction does happen during the summer.
Okay, so that's just the bulk, because it says it begins and then it continues, and I inferred that there was a break there, so.
Okay.
There's
And-
somewhat of a break.
Yeah, and so we'll stage things as well. One of the questions we had about the auditorium, if we're able to do that, is what would the impact be on the musical? That would probably be something that we would stage, because it's not just the musical, and that's big, but graduation happens at the end of June. So if all things worked as we want, construction in that space would start the day after graduation. And if we thought we couldn't get it done before school started, we would have to get as much done, because we use that space in the beginning of the school year. So pause construction, use the space, restart construction and those types of things. And that's what we've done throughout. When it comes to remodeling the classrooms, that work's got to be ready. Those rooms have to be ready to go when September rolls around.
And you can't work on them in the school, when the students are in class, because it's very distracting.
You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. There's other things we can do in other parts of the building, and that's where campus construction management is a great partner and figuring out what trades can be in and where they could be, and then working with our building principals and Frankie and I to see what we can do, because that December 2028, that's a hard deadline. We have to have construction completed. We have some very important paperwork that has to go into the state education department. And if we're late, then we don't get that aid flow. If we don't get that aid flow, then we can't pay our bills back, our bands or bonds or whatever the heck you call them. And that's really important. So it's a tight timeframe for sure. Yes.
So you did bring up a question that's been back in my brain. Currently, the Enema Elementary auditorium is closed down.
No, it's
So
not.
It's not?
We reopened it
Well, you did, okay.
today.
Today, okay, so, but the concerts are still happening.
Because we just opened it today, Lucinda. We're good. We're not
All
that
right,
good.
well, I was just worried that, I know the summer, the timeline,
Yeah.
if they were happening simultaneously, if it wasn't ready with both auditoriums being down, but you're not anticipating that to be a problem.
Well, no, but I wasn't anticipating to be a problem before it was a problem either. So let me explain what happened there. We had, as I said many times, we had leaks in that roof. And the elementary building is a historical building. So construction, and you were here for it, needs to be very specific. It's really tight oversight. And there's, the next time you're in that space, you're going to look up and you're going to notice some differences. There's sections from front to back that are plaster. When plaster gets wet, it doesn't stay where it's supposed to. And that's what happened. And we had some plaster fall. Big piece, no one was in there, big piece of plaster. So we shut it down. We actually have a local person who's an expert in plaster. And when he starts talking about plaster, your mind is going to be blown, because it's amazing the differences and what he knows and so on and so forth. Once we fixed the leak, we had him come back and examine every inch of that space. They had scaffolding up across the auditorium. They did additional demo wherever they found some loose plaster, took some more down, and now they've deemed it safe for use. And we literally just got that at the end of last week. Well, before I had to close school for 2 days. So we are reopening that. It doesn't look pretty. There's sections of it that don't look pretty any longer, but useful is more important than pretty at this point. Once we get that roof fixed permanently, or 30-year warranty permanently, then we'll fix that plaster. Go ahead.
So question, I'm used to state projects where, so local match is 20%. I have to spend $1, the state will give me 80 cents back on my dollar. Is that how this works
Yeah.
also?
Yeah.
So you have to spend money before they reimburse you.
Correct.
Yep. So we would take like a bond anticipation note, which is like a short-term financing to get the money upfront. And then we would slowly pay it back over time. And then once we finish the final cost report, then we would officially go out to bond, which essentially it's like long-term financing.
So the state will only pay on stuff that you already paid out for. And the turnaround time, 30 days or something like that.
Much longer than that. Much longer. Years. Yeah.
So
Much longer.
they will not start paying, the state will not start sending us aid until those final cost reports are done in December of 2028. So the aid
So
will
the
flow
complete
after that.
project has to be finished before they.
Yes.
Yep.
Silly question.
No.
Okay, so our taxes will go up. Say if your house is worth $300,000, they'll go up $150 a year.
Yep.
And that's for 7 years. At the end of the 7 years, do you anticipate that it will drop down to the current level, or nobody knows because it's in the
It'll
future?
depend on like that graph showed for Proposition 2. There is debt falling off in 2034. So if
Yeah.
you can see, if we didn't add any more projects on, it would go down. But we're anticipating that you want to try and keep the debt service levels at a consistent
But
level.
are we gonna keep it at the new level or are we gonna allow it to come back to 600?
That'll depend on whatever project goes.
Taxes never-
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
It is. a good
It's a
question.
good question.
So what was the total number of, like, what's the total number of projects out there? Like, if we had a blank check right now, not including air conditioning, you're looking at probably $60 million worth of projects we have identified that at some point in time need to get addressed in this district.
Yeah, but when are they reimbursed with the state?
Well, that's a whole nother, there's a whole nother formula attached to that because you're only allowed to do certain, so only so much work at certain buildings on certain times and stuff like that. But to your point, we've got a number, I mean, this is our third project in 10 years. I've been on the board for 10 years now. It's our third project that we've done since I've been on the board. And we still have probably another 30 some odd million identified. And then I think we have another a 5-year buildings condition survey starting in February, March next year.
Yeah.
To readdress the next 10, 15 years. So it's gonna be constantly ongoing. And it's balancing that, making sure we have enough reserves so we can do stuff at no impact and then move it forward. Yeah, and we've got a very old school.
But it's so nice.
It is, and sometimes, I mean, for as long as it took to get the roof acknowledged, to basically open up the auditorium there, it's just a nightmare. That's what we gotta go through.
Well, and the buildings are also.
80.
Yeah, it was a depression.
So one of the biggest components of our last project that no one thinks about is electricity. This building was run on the cogen and it was absolutely at the end of its life. We ran into major supply chain issues. We had parts coming over from France. And if you remember back how slowly things were coming across the pond in 2020. At one point, the whole building was being run on a massive diesel generator just so we could have school. And then magically in July, we flipped over to the grid and it was ridiculous how excited I was that we had electricity there. But those are some of the things we're trying to overcome. And you look at boilers and some of the other, and the plumbing and whatnot that we've had to address and we need to continue to address. So the likelihood of future projects is very real. It is very real. But it's a legitimate question. Wow. Currently, it's going to drop off in 7 years. Might that change between now and then? Yeah, it might. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Just a comment, so I've seen other districts, when they get do you know what the average assessment is?
I don't.
So one thing that I saw that I actually liked was they showed down to, instead of them doing the math, the other thing was, it's less if they have a star assumption too, they also showed that also. So,
Where did you see that?
so it was Rochester area.
If you remember, that would be neat
Yeah,
to
that'd
see.
be great.
That would
Thank
be
you.
neat to see. Okay. Any other questions? Last comments, anyone? Okay, so, hopefully you come out to vote tomorrow from 9 to 9 in our foyer. Take a look at that ceiling when you're over there.
That multi-use foyer.
That multi-use foyer, yeah. Hopefully it will be.
I dreamed your promise in that foyer.
I seen the problems.
Yeah, and it looked exactly the same, I promise you. So, thank you for coming out tonight. I appreciate it.